every band should be named after some 70s drug reference, right? Because that's relevant in 2021. That's going to get the kids on Spotify to hit. Ooh, stream that one again. I want that band that's named after the 70s thing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another episode of EventSpeak with me, Big John, CEO Beyond Experiential. At this point, I feel like I don't even need to explain what it is that we do here. We like to talk to people, and we like to talk to folks that are across the entire event industry ecosystem. And we have had a lot of different guests from every different facet of that on the show since last March when we launched it. And today's guest is an old friend of mine, and somebody that I was out on the road with back in the day, and somebody that has become one of my favorite people to talk to, and I'm just really thrilled to have him with us today. His name is Jeff Nolan. He is a music and memorabilia consultant, and he's also my buddy. So welcome to the forum. Welcome to EventSpeak, Jeff. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, John. Long time no see, man.
Dude.
What a treat.
I was just going to say, man, as soon as you appeared with your white specs on, I was like, oh, dude, I haven't seen this guy in far too long. You know,
I had the same reaction, John. Same reaction.
I remembered the last time I saw you, as I was down in Orlando, where you live. I was on an experiential tour for Land Shark with Nick at the time, and that was 2012. It's the last time I physically saw you.
It's weird. Things, you know how it is. Things seem like they were 1,000 years ago, and they seem like they were yesterday simultaneously.
All at the same time. All at the same time. Yeah. Because
perception is an odd thing.
Perception is reality. As we were talking off camera, so for the folks watching at home, I did this really rad tour, 10 years ago now. For the Hard Rock, and Jeff is a longtime collaborator with the Hard Rock and their main memorabilia historian there for many years. And we were going out on the road with this 50th anniversary spectacular semi decked out with all this amazing memorabilia, and ended up Jeff being the guy that I was going to be out there with. And you know, for any of you out there that have done experiential tours, and you know, you have to sometimes do those interviews where the agency says, well, yeah, we dig you, but you got to talk to the client first. And you know, I'm thinking most clients, you know, they're corporate guys, and you know, they're trying to just find the right fit. And then this guy gets on and is just like, hey, dude, yeah, so you know, it's about all, because I'm totally in the mode. I'm trying to totally sell it. And I remember you made some kind of comment, and you're like, well, you know, if it was up to me, it'd just be all about the memorabilia, but we got to sell cheeseburgers too. So I was like, well,
you know, it's those kind of things. It's if you're going to do something that's predicated on music, or in the case of that experience, rock and roll, then you got to do that genuinely. You can't. Yeah. You know, you can't put this mask on. It's like it's ridiculous, and I would have had zero interest in dealing with anybody from an agency who was fake, or who was playing a role, or who was coming from a script. I think that in every level of anything experiential or event driven, if it's thematic, then you can't fake the funk. You're either doing this for real, and you're coming from a place of real passion, or you're not.
100%.
And you were coming from the right place, so it was an easy decision.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, and you know, after doing it, where you know, I think you'll agree that when you have people that genuinely are interested in rock and roll memorabilia, the kind of folks that come out, like a lot of those people we met along that journey, these people are passionate. They know what's up. They're going to see through bullshit a mile away. And therefore, you've got to be authentic, you know. And I want to get back to this a little bit down the way in the interview, but I want to talk about that experience with the guy that showed up in Seattle with the identical guitar from the dude from the Rolling Stones,
Bryan Jones.
Bryan Jones, yes. Yeah. Yes, but it's a great story, everybody. Stay tuned for it. We'll get to it. But first, Jeff, let's back up a little bit, and I'm going to let you now take the mic for a second and just tell everybody who you are, What is a music and memorabilia historian, consultant, and how did you get into that?
Well, yeah, how I got into it is dumb luck and a misspent youth, John. It really just sort of, I was a music writer for a long time, a professional musician, still sort of am, if that even exists in the world anymore. And I just kind of found myself in a town where Hard Rock happened to be headquartered. And they were in desperate need of somebody who really, really knew this stuff back and forth. And like we were saying earlier, didn't fake it. This was genuine. The passion was real and could express that to the guests and really find a way to bridge the gap between the guest and the collection. And I just kind of fit the bill. And what I do is, with Hard Rock for many years, when it comes to music and memorabilia, I was essentially the face of the brand, and did a lot of media, a lot of sort of contextual writing for pieces, putting things in their kind of cultural space for the company, and almost acting like a mascot sometimes. I felt it's like, oh, we don't know what to do with this particular event or this particular corporate thing we're doing. Trot the rock and roll guy out. He'll go make them laugh and they'll get into it. Well, what happened, and what maybe they realized relatively quickly, and this is carried over into many other things that I've done, is the things that make you do well with any passion that you have, in my case music, it translates to everything else that you do in business, and everything else you do when you're dealing with clients, when you're dealing with corporate people, when you're dealing with bosses. It really comes down to, who, like we were saying earlier, who is genuine and who is not. And if you are genuine, it's infectious. And my own, you've seen this when we work together, my own sort of extremely nerdy, giddy passion for this stuff would translate to the guest, and it would ignite their own little giddy passions. And it's making those connections was really the name of the game.
100%, man.
I don't even know if I answered your question. It just sounded good.
Even if you didn't, it did sound good. And let's face it, that's what it's all about. And that's actually what I was kind of hinting at, that I mentioned this Bryan Jones guitar. One of correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the original guitar players long before Ron Wood's days in the Rolling Stones. Oh, yeah. So this 50th anniversary tour, everybody that's watching at home, Hard Rock sort of took their shiniest pieces of memorabilia, that was encased, and you could be able to go on this little. You basically walk through it yourself, but we would we would sort of moderate it, give everybody an introduction, tell everybody a little bit about the pieces, and then Nolan's hanging out to engage with these different folks to let them know exactly what they're looking at. So we're going around city to city. We're having a good time. We're in Seattle, and I remember it was towards the end of the day, and you came up to me and you're like, dude, I know we're about to close, but hear me out. We got to stay open. And this guy shows up with what, Jeff? Talk us through what happened.
Well, the instrument you're talking about is arguably the single most iconic instrument in Hard Rock's entire collection, and it is a Vox teardrop-shaped guitar that belonged to Bryan Jones of the Rolling Stones. And hardcore Rolling Stones fans get weak in the knees when they see it. Well, there's this guy that was living in Seattle, a guy called Kevin Randall, and Kevin is fairly renowned in the kind of musical instrument industry as a builder of effects pedals. Very high end, very hard to get, very rare and boutique. He did work for some major names, right?
And you didn't know that going into it, though, when he showed up, right? That was
not till he was there.
Not till he was there. Okay, right.
But then I'm enough of a guitar dork to once I put two and two together, it's like, oh shoot, you're Kevin Randall. He shows up and is carrying a guitar case, like a gig bag on his back, opens it up, and he busts out a Bryan Jones Vox teardrop that is when I say identical, I mean I mean that quite literally. It was.
I saw it. It was
absolutely indistinguishable from the original. Every little mark, every little ding, thing was 55-year-old guitar. Everything was perfect, and Kevin had built it himself. And he even had like a Bryan Jones look, kind of a unique guy, I think we'll go with describing Kevin, a unique fella.
My brief experience with him, I'd agree.
And we wound up taking the original Bryan Jones out of the shadow box and putting it in Kevin's hands. And it's immediate tears, just visceral reaction.
He was a blubbering mess. I remember
it was,
well.
Which was so fantastic when you can when you could connect with somebody like that. And he had this buddy with him, and it turned out the buddy was a guy called Randy Hansen, who is actually really renowned in the Pacific Northwest as a Jimi Hendrix impersonator, and has been since like the 70s.
I forgot about that. Right.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like, oh my God, you're Kevin Randall, who the equipment builder, and then Randy starts playing, and it's like, wait a second, you're Randy Hansen. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was a couple some of my old friends came out. The guys from Mudhoney, the legendary Seattle grunge band.
Say Mudhoney. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. And Matt Lucan, the bass player for Mudhoney, who's actually a Seattle icon, that guy, he pulls me aside, he goes, hey man, is that Randy Hansen? What the hell? It was amazing.
They know the Jimi Hendrix impersonator. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's a fun thing about that, John. Kevin Randall, I saw Kevin right before the pandemic hit.
Yep.
And guess where he lives now? Orlando, frickin' Florida. He lives here.
That's truly a small world, man. But
it's crazy.
If I remember, on a quick footnote to that story, you guys ended up jamming in the trailer.
Oh, yeah.
I remember there because I'm sitting outside and you're just doing your thing, and you invited us in to come hang out. You know, there was only the two of us, me and Jaybird, the driver. Like, we're just hanging out, and then we come in, and you guys have got somebody had an amp from somewhere, and the next thing I know, the dude from Mudhoney, you and Kevin are hanging out, jamming in the trailer, and using the original Bryan Jones guitar. I was like,
yeah. Oh yeah, us a guy.
Wow,
we had Bruce.
Awesome.
We had Bruce from Mother Love Bone playing. Randy Hansen. Myself, Kevin. It was amazing. It was. But awesome. That's the thing. It's like you get these museum pieces, and it's an interesting business to be in because yes, these are pieces of history, and yes, they must be treated with maximum respect. But it's still a damn guitar. And what does it exist for? To hang on a wall? Fuck that. It exists exactly. to get down. And if you're not airing them out every now and then, it's kind of a bummer.
And not to mention, man, even just looking at it, my public relations, experiential brain goes, what better kind of experience could somebody have that's connected to the Hard Rock brand than what those men experienced that day? Walking up,
nothing created raving fans more than that.
More than that, because you decided to let them play that guitar. You could have just talked with them, but you took it out of the shadow box and you let them play it.
Oh yeah, and I got a lot of shit from my corporate overlords about that stuff. But I mean, what are you going to do? It's nobody was getting rich doing that, so it's like, am I going to play Jimi Hendrix's guitar and share this experience with some true enthusiasts and have this moment that here we are 10 years later talking about, or am I going to toe some arbitrary kind of rules that were made by people who don't even understand the nature of the instrument? It just didn't make any sense. So that didn't really ever concern me.
Total punk rock, man. So as I think the journey, this kind of brings up my next question / experience to remember, because it really was just pretty awesome. When we had a day off in Cleveland, if you remember, and your amazing bass playing awesome wife Erin was out, and you guys invited Nikki and I, my girlfriend at the time, who was also on the road with us for a few shows, to come join you at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And,
that was amazing. That was a great day.
Now, to everybody out there watching, you experiential tour managers and people that have been lucky enough, let's face it, sometimes you just end up doing really cool gigs. But it's not every day that you get invited to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with a guy like this, and the CEO of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at the time meets you at the front door and spends the first half of the day walking you through the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, telling you all these interesting bits and pieces of all of the different artifacts they have in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, buys us lunch, sits down with us. You guys are talking shop. I was like, this has got to be like a once in a lifetime thing. And I found it interesting because what would you say the biggest difference is in what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame does with their artifacts versus to what, say, Hard Rock does with all of their memorabilia? Artifacts, memorabilia. What's the difference?
There's a couple of fundamental differences. The Hall of Fame obviously is a straight up museum. That's what it is. It's not a selling burgers or hotel beds or slot machine hours. Doesn't generate the bottom line for the Hall of Fame. It is strictly a museum. Now, I think it's important to note this because there's a lot of controversy about the Hall of Fame. There are two Halls of Fame. There is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the sort of amorphous entity, like I have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yep. And then there's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum in Cleveland, which is what we're talking about. And obviously it's the same umbrella, but they're really different things. So I would recommend that anybody gets a chance goes and sees the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum because it's freaking amazing.
It's incredible.
But a big difference, and I remember we were talking about this, Terry, who was the president of the Hall of Fame at the time, a big difference was, like many museums, the Hall of Fame most of the stuff that was on display, and is on display at any given moment, is on loan. And Hard Rock, kind of by operational necessity, needs to own everything that they display outright.
Okay.
And that's a huge difference. If Hard Rock could have taken loans, or if they had decided to make that policy change, the level of stuff you can get just goes through the roof because, if Lemmy wanted to loan you the jacket he's wearing on the cover of the Ace of Spades album, but he doesn't want to give it away or sell it, then, Hard Rock's out of that conversation.
No.
Fun fact, he did loan it to the Hall of Fame, and then they promptly lost it, but whatever.
They loaned it and lost it. I just have this impression, like, who's got to make the phone call to Lemmy at the time?
Ooh.
Yeah, hey.
Not me.
The jacket that you gave us, that iconic jacket, I know you and you're going to laugh, but we kind of misplaced it. Yeah.
It's just incredible. I mean, obviously some insider stole it,
Somebody took it and was like, we'll deal with the consequences. It's funny because I'm living in Los Angeles. The Rainbow is one of my favorite places to hang out.
Sure.
And I could honestly say that let's say that I've been there at the time when Lemmy was alive and well, 10 times. Lemmy was there 4 or 5 times.
Sure.
Just hanging out at the bar. And
it was his living room.
Just hanging out, and dude, I love Motorhead. Like, I'm like, I was there with a girl at the time. I was on a date, and it's this beautiful woman. I don't know, she decided to go out with me for whatever reason. And I go to the bathroom, and we're sitting outside, and I come back, and she's sitting there smiling, and Lemmy's sitting across from her. Obviously, kind of putting his thing down, like, blah, blah. And then he saw me. He's like, hi, Mike. How you doing, Mike? And he kind of figured out right away what's going on. And he gets up, and he's like, sorry to interrupt, blah 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 blah. And then about 10 seconds later, the waitress comes over and brings a round of drinks that he bought for us.
That's Lemmy.
And he just kind of waved, and I was like, wow, that's just awesome. I was like, he could have sat and hit on you all night for all I care. What do I know?
No, that was Lemmy.
But just,
absolutely,
it was just so rad. So all right. So now clearly we know that you're a memorabilia historian. Clearly that comes from being a guitar dork, quote unquote, but you're also an accomplished guitar player. You have quite a history in playing, as you said, professionally. Can you walk us through a little bit of that and take us to where you're at now, being the lead guitar player in the Ludes?
Well, I mean, I sort of had the teenage dream kind of happened in a way for me in the 80s, where my band, I was in this band called I Love You, which I challenge anybody to find a band with a stupider name. But
I'm glad you said it. I didn't.
It was a really good band, and we got signed to Geffen, and we toured like Pearl Jam's first tour was with us, and like we did gigs with them when they were still Mookie Blaylock, and they were opening for us.
Wow!
Oh yeah,
I didn't know that.
It was great. We did the entire first United States Pearl Jam tour was them and my band. It was crazy. And they would play, we would play, and then all 9 of us would play together. We would always encore together, and we would typically do "I Got a Feelin'" by the Beatles into "Funk 49" by the James Gang, because both of those songs go A to D. But, so it was, wow. We made a couple of records for Geffen, did a ton of touring, and then that just kind of went the way it went. And then I wound up working with Scott Weiland for a couple of years, and I was
That's right.
I was Scott Weiland's lead guitar player on his solo album 12 Bar Blues, and we did the Tank Girl soundtrack together. We did a John Lennon tribute album called Working Class Hero. Worked with Scott for quite a while.
Not to interrupt you, man, and and
there's stories.
I'm sure there's stories, and I feel bad because he was such a massive talent.
That's a fact.
It's unfortunate that everyone knows how he died. Everyone knows that the man struggled with addiction most of his life, and I think that overshadows the fact that he was just a massive talent, and I think one of the great lead singers of his generation,
without question.
Can you tell us if there's any one story that really stands out, or maybe just the general vibe of what it was like working with Scott on a creative level, and also, of course, on the crazy Scott Weiland level?
I mean, Scott. You just hit it on the head. Scott was a great guy. He had a massive drug problem, and that was it informed everything. Creatively, I loved working with Scott because, that guy could take. You could give him the most boneheaded little 2-note riff, and he could put a vocal hook on it that made it sound like an instant classic. It was just amazing. You barely had to do anything. It's like, here's some dumb shit I wrote 20 years ago that when I was 12. And he'd be like, what if I go blah, 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 and it's like, now it sounds like Led Zeppelin, He was just so gifted. But thing that Scott, people don't often know about Scott, because the mythology of, crazy drug addict and all that is true. But Scott had he was a big-hearted guy. And I remember when my grandfather died, the very first person to come hang out with me, console me, and check on me was Scott. And he didn't call, he didn't, he didn't send flowers. He drove his ass over to my house and, just gave me a hug and was just like, "Are you okay? Is there anything I could do?" And this was at the height of him being a gigantic rock star. I mean, he was one of the biggest artists in the world at this time.
Stone Temple Pilots is blowing up.
Absolutely. This is like when they were dead, they were just the top. And, he was that kind of guy. I was really, but the drug thing was just debilitating. And I was absolutely gutted when I heard how he died. And I just pictured him in the back of some club in Minnesota in a tour bus ODing and having it sounded so lonely. It just bummed me out, man.
It's heartbreaking. And I had my friend Lucas Keller was on the show, the founder of Milk and Honey, and Lucas managed Scott for a minute. And
he knows.
And Lucas knows because Lucas is a bit younger than I am, and Core was like his favorite record. Lucas and I went back to the days when we were both trying to play in a band together, and go for it, if you will. He's 17, I'm 22, whatever. So for him, it was a real moment to get to work with Scott until you actually had to be. And he said very similar things where he's like, on one level, the man was just brilliant, and when he was present, he was just so generous and great to be around. But when that fundamental darkness, if you will, would kick in, it overshadowed everything, and it made it impossible. And like he would be like a Jekyll and a Hyde, because
Absolutely.
This would come into play. But it was heartbreaking, and it seems to me like at least from the perspective that you got to experience that, and that you got that opportunity to incorporate your creativity into his music. And I think that it makes you a better guitar player. It makes you better.
Oh yeah.
Like it all builds character, and I think a lot of people don't realize that play in bands. It's not just about the ability to execute chords or
that has little to do with
scales. It's about that character that you build from those experiences, and and writing and all that. So now, fast forward to today. Walk us through what you're up to these days. I mean, we know you have a band called the Ludes. Let's talk about the Ludes for a second.
I have a power trio that I've had for quite a long time now, called the Ludes, and Ludes, like Quaaludes. Hey. Because every band should be named after some 70s drug reference, right? Because that's relevant in 2021. That's going to get the kids on Spotify to hit. Ooh, stream that one again. I want that band that's named after the 70s thing with the gray-haired dude with the. But it's funny. It's funny that you brought up Lemmy earlier, because I think of the Ludes as very much kind of special needs children of Motorhead. We're very much in that mode. It's a really fun band. It's really great. It's become kind of like the lifestyle for the three of us, and we're about to release a bunch of new stuff. This year is going to be really crazy for us. And I think what's good about where I am with music and with the band now is I am very, very comfortable that the journey is the goal. I was lucky in my life to be able to get the major label record deal and work with big artists like Scott and all that. And I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. But I really don't care where the good jam happens, just as long as it happens. It can happen in this room. It can happen in our rehearsal studio. It can happen at a sweaty club. It can happen at Madison Square Garden. I don't care, as long as it happens.
Yeah.
And once I kind of got to that point, and this is years ago for me, once I got to that point with it, it really started to become a complete joy for me again. Where there's no agenda attached to it at all. And I'll get people asking me all the time, are you guys going to do this or do that? Or, have you made the EPK for the upcoming blah, blah? No. No, we didn't do any of that shit.
We're just writing music, man.
You come see us live, and it's like, well, you guys are, only regional in the Southeast. Well, when you're in the Southeast, maybe it'll work out.
Then come out and see us.
But I'll tell you, John, I did do one thing a few months ago, and it was kind of the highlight of 2020, the world's history's shittiest year. I had one really bright spot. I played theremin on the new Blue Oyster Cult album.
You played the theremin on the new
a Blue Oyster Cult album. I did.
Everybody at home, you can't make this stuff up. This is just the life that this guy leads. Okay,
well, it was my joke with them is that in 20 years there's going to be a Saturday Night Live sketch that's going to be more theremin. Yeah.
I need more theremin.
I did. I played theremin on the new Blue Oyster Cult album.
That's incredible. Dude, and I don't remember what it pertained to. I caught it on your social media, but you're a great interview. I've seen you do a lot of interviews. You did an interview recently that caught Howard Stern's attention, right?
I did. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, that was out of the blue, man, when all of a sudden my phone's blowing up. Hey, man, they're talking about your thing on Stern. Like, wait, what?
Like, what?
And Well, I brought John Five, the guitarist, who he was Marilyn Manson's guitarist. He's been Rob Zombie's guitarist for a long time. He's worked with David Lee Roth. The guy is an insane virtuoso.
Yeah.
And I brought him into Hard Rock's memorabilia warehouse a while back, and I just handed him one iconic guitar after the other, just like what we were talking about with Kevin Randall on the truck in Seattle. It's like sometimes you got to let people play these things. Well, I had John Five play it, and John is unbelievably talented, but he's also very charming and fun. But he is very savvy with social media. And which is a big thing with contemporary guitar players. There's the sort of YouTube, Instagram guitarist is kind of the new guitar hero. Mm-hmm. And the thing went gangbusters and is the most viewed piece of social content in Hard Rock's history by a very wide margin.
Wow.
And then, Howard Stern apparently was just kind of flitting around on YouTube and bumped into it and was compelled enough by it to talk about it for 8 full minutes at the top of his show. 8 minutes, John.
On the Stern Show. I mean, how many million people listened to that show?
It was crazy. And it was funny because, it was so early in the morning, and John Five is West Coast as well. And I was just like, I gotta call John. And it's not like me and John are like tight buddies. We know each other, and we have, I have his number. We've done some work together. But this was one where it's like, oh no, there's not going to be any emails. I'm calling his ass.
This is a phone call. That's amazing.
And so when I got a hold of him, he was just flipping out. He was just like, this is incredible, dude. So, I'm hoping to do another thing like that with John at some point. Obviously, if I had my shit together, we would have been doing something the next day. But, things come together when they come together. And even like the initial thing I did with him that did so well and Stern picked up, it's not like there was some grandiose plan behind that. There was no strategy planning meeting about how we're going to have the popular viral video. No, there's something cool came about and we pointed a camera at it. It was that simple.
Sometimes those organic experiences are the best because, engaging content creates engagement. So, lastly, let's talk about what you're up to these days with, you mentioned that you guys are doing these guitar clinics at Hard Rock hotels and other places. Walk us through a little bit about what that is.
Well, as I went to more of an independent entity and not always being tied to Hard Rock, obviously that can be a scary move when you've been with a company for a long time. And I always felt at home and very comfortable doing event-based things and experiential shit, especially when it came to private groups. And, hotels, and not just Hard Rock, but hotels in general, do, so much of that kind of business, obviously. And I'll do things like, if it is at a Hard Rock, I'll craft a bespoke memorabilia tour of the property that is geared towards the business interest of the client. Like, for example, I did a group of insurance salesmen, and I researched what insurance companies underwrote all these tours through history. And so as we toured around and we were looking at stuff, here's David Bowie's, Ziggy Stardust outfit. Lloyd's of London underwrote that in 1972 for blah, 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 blah. And it would get them talking about insurance underwriting. And they would be going, oh, man, it must have been hard to write a policy for da, 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 da. And once they started telling the story themselves, then I knew it was successful. That was the goal the whole time.
That's brilliant.
So stuff like that. And we do team building exercises called string theory, which is based around getting people playing guitar. And my partner Brian Chartikoff and I, he's a genius teacher. I'm more the kind of color commentator. And because he will get someone who has never touched the instrument playing something that sounds like music inside of 90 seconds. I'm not exaggerating.
Wow.
And it's a lot of fun and very strong for team building. And we're working now on a pretty irreverent trivia and scavenger hunt thing that I'm looking forward to unveiling in a couple months.
Oh, cool, man! Wow.
Yeah.
For folks that are watching at home that might want to know more about you, at the Jeff Nolan on Instagram is probably the best way to reach you.
Sure.
Why not?
Yes.
Why not?
Yes.
Let's
yes.
go with that. Let's go with that.
Instagram's good.
Instagram's good. Lastly, I always like to ask guests and step outside, the obvious a little bit, but I'm fortunate enough that I do know your lovely wife, Erin. How is she doing? How have you guys been doing through the pandemic? What have you been doing to kind of keep yourselves entertained while the whole world shut down around you?
Well, I mean, it's been hard, and it's been. We've been lucky that it's been less difficult for us than many, and more difficult for us than some. It's getting used to this was. I mean, at first it seemed like a grand adventure, and then it seemed just kind of tiresome, and then it seemed depressing, and then it seemed like, oh my God, it's Armageddon. For us, for Erin and I, trying to keep busy was the biggie. She's done very well. Erin's a graphic designer of some renown, and so she really did well, relative to the pandemic. She was never completely out of work, really. I, on the other hand, was for quite a long time. And, a lot of writing and recording,
Sure.
a lot of creative outlet stuff. What we probably failed at, and we were good about this in the beginning, was exercise.
Sure.
And I think that the people who, if they were on quarantine, if they were able to really be diligent about staying physically active, I think they probably fared well physically and mentally. And we were good about it for a while. We probably drank a little too much.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just telling the truth. There were some nights where we definitely just drank too much. But I'll tell you what, got my first vaccine on this last Monday. Oh yeah,
days ago
right there, baby.
2 days ago for me, I got my first dose of
nice.
So yeah,
nice.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy, and my boys in it's funny, my boys in Blue Oyster Cult are coming to town, and they're playing a socially distanced show, and so I'm actually going.
Get the theremin out?
I wouldn't that be amazing? I was telling him, I was like, I've got a cape and I've got a wizard's thing with big sleeves, and I need to come out and recreate my theremin part. It's like you guys don't dress like wizards enough anymore. But
you're living too close to Harry Potter land there.
So we're going to get out, and that's going to be the first thing we've done in a year.
Yeah. I feel like the silver lining to a lot of this has been me personally, as I'm watching, California, we've been on lockdown for the longest time, and pretty strict at that. Seeing it starting to open up now, having the ability to get out and have a sense of normalcy has been really incredibly reviving, and just it makes you really become vastly aware of what you're grateful for in your life, and you realize a lot of the things that we, a lot of luxuries that we took for granted prior to this pandemic, and I feel like now moving forward, we're more vastly aware of what we have as opposed to maybe what we desire, which really is the true definition of gratitude. Jeff, I just want to thank you sincerely for coming by the show. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. And please send my best to Erin. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Nolan, you can find him on Instagram at the Jeff Nolan. This is EventSpeak with me, I'm still Big John, and you can find us and continue the conversation over at www.eventspeak.com. As always, reminding you guys to take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you next time.